If you deal with chronic symptoms that will not go away or keep getting worse, you've probably come across something in regards to nervous system regulation. It's all over the place. And maybe you've tried to regulate your nervous system and you've tried to do these things that people have told you that if your nervous system is regulated, your symptoms will go away. But I feel like that's only part of the story. And unfortunately, it's what we hear most. Most of the conversations online are centered around nervous system regulation. And so today I want to talk about what I think is the biggest lie around nervous system regulation, because we need to talk about what happens when a nervous system gets stuck and when nervous system regulation techniques just won't cut it. What's going to vary from person to person is your baseline. This is the baseline level of stress and activation that your system is sitting at any given time. And while you might think the issue that you're dealing with is nervous system dysregulation, what you may be dealing with instead is actually nervous system sensitization. And again, the difference between those two things is the baseline. It's where we're starting from most of the time. With dysregulation, your system is going to spike and then it's going to come back down. It may get stuck for a while, but eventually it does return. But the problem really is what happens when we move from dysregulation sometimes to chronic dysregulation, and what effect does that have on the nervous system? The effect is that baseline over time rises and we're starting at a much higher place of activation before any other stress gets put on the system. And once the system gets sensitized, the symptoms become more chronic. So they aren't like an occasional migraine, it's like chronic things that you're dealing with 24/7, and the nervous system starts interpreting everything and nothing as a threat. So I know in the dysregulation world, it's referred to as like your window of tolerance. But the question is, what happens when you consistently are out of that window of tolerance? Over time, the baseline just shifts upward. And once that baseline has crept up and up and up, you're starting every day already activated. There's no room to move. There's no capacity. And if you're wondering if your nervous system is sensitized, I have a quiz that you can take and I will link that in the description. So your nervous system, when it's sensitized, isn't necessarily overreacting, but you're starting higher. The baseline is higher. There's less room to move. There's less wiggle room. And that's why everything feels like too much when your system is sensitized. So ask yourself, do you feel sensitive to things? Do you feel like it doesn't take much to push you over the edge? Do you feel like your capacity is at absolutely zero? Do you have a lot of chronic symptoms like anxiety, pain, things that are just not being adequately treated with medical treatment? If so, sensitization is very likely at play. You want to just picture like a thermostat that's slowly getting nudged up and up and up until what is normal is actually like boiling hot. But we didn't necessarily catch it because it was just kind of a slow rise over time. And the biggest lie that I see in the nervous system regulation space is that everyone's starting from the same place, when the truth is everyone's nervous system is going to be in a different place. So for one person, using nervous system regulation tools may be an absolute game changer. And I think one way to know whether or not this applies to you is, has it been? Has it helped you? Has it been something that has calmed you down? Or is it very, very short-lived? Because the other thing to remember is that when your system is sensitized, the goal isn't necessarily to calm down. So I see the two as having a little bit differing and possibly opposing philosophies. One of them says, I'm really activated and I need to bring myself back down ASAP. The other one says, I need to learn how to relate to this in a new way so I can send a different signal so that my system naturally stands down. And like I said, I don't see this as like two neat little boxes like, oh, you're just dysregulated. Oh, you're sensitized. I see them as a spectrum. And I think that in time, the nervous system dysregulation turns into sensitization just because it has become so chronic and the system just gets very, very oversensitive because it's being used so much. It's being activated so often. A healthy nervous system, it's going to activate and it's going to come back down. In the middle of the spectrum, it's going to run a little bit on the hot side, but it's still going to be functioning. Again, it can get kind of stuck, but these tools and these techniques can be very helpful. It's like when your system just needs a little bit of help coming back down. Whereas with sensitization, that stuff's just not going to touch it at all. Because on the far end with sensitization, we're dealing with 24/7 locked on symptoms. And there are many things that raise this baseline over time. Years of chronic stress, years of chronic anxiety, constantly pushing through, ignoring what you need, just never letting your system have a chance to kind of stand down a little bit. And eventually it just overworks. And even more, unfortunately, societally, we are encouraged to live in that way, the way that literally sensitizes our nervous system. Another way to look at it is kind of like an alarm that gets a little too touchy. We recently had to replace our fire alarms in this house, and one of them started going off, and then another one started going off, and another one started going off, always at 2 a.m., by the way. But there was no fire. There was no smoke. There was no reason it needed to go off other than the fact that, I don't know, maybe it needed batteries. The real issue, though, is that what you think is the problem isn't actually the problem, despite the alarm blaring like there is a problem. And the truth is the nervous system can run like that for quite a while, but eventually we all get to a place where things kind of start breaking down because of the overuse and because of the sensitivity that we're constantly in this triggered and activated state, that it just becomes our new baseline. Again, our baseline isn't supposed to be super high. We're supposed to have the capacity to move between states and come back to balance. And something else to remember is that it's not just one event. Many of us had something that pushed our system over the edge, and we become very focused on that. It's the thing we think caused the issue, when really it's just the straw that broke the camel's back. If you find yourself saying, ever since I had that panic attack, ever since I got divorced, ever since I got that surgery, everything has been a problem, it's worth considering if you had any other telltale signs that you were on your way towards sensitization. Because while it is common to have one event that pushes the system over the edge, it normally doesn't come out of nowhere for most of us. Most people, when all their symptoms started, they can identify some really mega stressful event that preceded everything. They knew that the state that they were living in already was stressed out all the time, worrying all the time, pushing all the time, and then seemingly something comes along and says, this can't go on anymore like this, and the whole system, all of the alarms start blaring. The truth is the system just gets tipped over at a certain point. And I think the unfortunate truth is that so many people are walking around with a sensitized nervous system, and they don't know that. They don't know that it's not normal to live in such a state of panic and terror and worry and pain and symptoms all of the time. And the beautiful thing is that so many people are making progress with reversing or reducing these symptoms. So again, just kind of review, do nervous system regulation techniques work? And then a good follow-up question to that is, am I using these things to make what I'm feeling go away? I feel like nervous system regulation techniques would have maybe been helpful when I was at the start of everything that I was experiencing. But by the time I tried to implement them, it just wasn't helpful. I felt like I was, pouring a water bottle on a blazing fire. And everyone's nervous system is starting at a different place. And so it's not uncommon to be sensitized and then to feel a bit better and be dysregulated and then possibly to go back to sensitization. Like I said, it's a spectrum. I think people go down the spectrum. I think they go up the spectrum. So it can be hard to know at what point the right tools apply. And the goal for desensitizing your nervous system is different than the goal of regulating your nervous system. I see regulating your nervous system as like something kind of like in the moment to like bring you back to a state that feels better, whereas desensitizing the nervous system is kind of retraining it to show it that there's no reason to be blaring all of these alarms. It's okay for you to stand down. This isn't needed anymore. And so it's up to us to kind of know, where are we at? What would be helpful? And also to know if you tried nervous system regulation stuff and it doesn't do anything for you, that's information as well. Ultimately, if your nervous system is sensitized, the goal is to bring the baseline down. So how do we actually do that? That happens by changing the way you respond, not by adding more tools. I'm not a huge fan of tools in the desensitization phase, but I do think that once the fear comes down, once the relationship begins changing, there can be tools that can be helpful. And that's part of everyone's unique individual journey to figure out what works best for me. But this distinction between, am I just dysregulated or is my nervous system at the point of sensitization, really opened up a whole new world for me. A world that I'm still exploring to this day. It helped me realize where I was going wrong. And it helped me realize that I didn't need to regulate my nervous system at this point. We were just way too far past that. The goal at this point was to change the way I was interfacing with what I was experiencing. And so the focus changes. It changes to things like reducing the fear around your sensations, moving with less energy to fix, spending less time with the meaning making in terms of what is the worst possible case scenario here. Especially once the nervous system is sensitized, it learns from what it observes. It learns from what you do. It learns from how you react and how you respond, not necessarily from what you tell yourself or try to convince yourself of. It watches the way that you respond to discomfort. And I think it more so is looking at you to ask, is this an emergency or not? It's already deeming whatever's happening as an emergency because it's throwing up all these symptoms, but how you respond either confirms or denies what it is picking up. And consistency is so important with this. It is a changed response over and over and over again. And we do that until the system stops bracing. Healing isn't linear. Flares happen. Setbacks happen, symptoms move around. It's all part of the process. It is not a sign that you have failed at this or that it's not working. I want you to tell me in the comments what resonated with you. Do you feel like your nervous system is just dysregulated, or do you feel like you're in full-blown sensitization? And remember, the solution isn't the same for everybody. What's most important is knowing where you're at and what you're dealing with so that you can take the right action that's actually helpful. This can be a messy, long process, and the best thing to do is to have the right roadmap. Let me know how your journey is going in the comments, and I'll see you guys next time.